Hello, this is Sachi Yanari-Rizzo, Curator Prints and Drawings. Every other month, I present a gallery talk in the Print and Drawing Study Center. For this season's Print Room Talks, I'm focusing on the works of highly creative families, including couples, siblings, and extended families. Last month, we looked at the works of husband and wife, Thomas and Mary Nimmo Moran. There has been much attention given to the members of the Fort Wayne's extraordinary Hamilton family, and today we'll be looking at the artistry of different members. It will be helpful to begin by looking at a portion of the Hamilton family tree that is taken out of Barbara Sickerman's book, Alice Hamilton, A Life in Letters. Probably the most famous family members are from Allan Hamilton's son, Montgomery, and his wife, Gertrude Hamilton. Headwaters Park recently installed sculptures highlighting the achievements of their daughters, Alice and Edith, and cousin Agnes. On the right is a group photograph of Montgomery and Gertrude's daughters. We see going from left to right, first Nora, then Margaret, Alice, and Edith. A major source of inspiration for the sisters was their mother, Gertrude, who encouraged them to be aspirational and pursue their goals in life. From about 1870 through the 1920s, American women began pursuing careers outside of their assumed domestic roles and developed a public voice. The Hamilton women belonged to this first generation of women who went to college and became pioneers in their professions and in social reform. The oldest daughter, Edith, was a renowned writer and classicist, authoring the books The Greek Way, The Roman Way, and Mythology. Alice was a leader in the field of industrial toxicology and wrote the first American textbook on industrial poisons. She became the first woman appointed to Harvard University's faculty. Margaret became head mistress for Bryn Mawr School, a college preparatory school for women. Nora, who we will look at today, was the accomplished artist in the family. Fort Wayne's art scene is indebted to the Hamilton families, whose remodeled carriage house was the site for art classes from 1892 to 1903. It served as the early roots of our beloved Fort Wayne Art School. Nora studied there. While she was in her mid-20s, Nora spent 2 years in Europe from around 1897 to 1899. She studied under James Abbott McNeill Whistler, an American expatriate living in England. He may have been a catalyst for her interest in printmaking. Most works in the Fort Wayne Museum of Art's collection by Nora are etchings and lithographs. At that time, Whistler was known for his paintings, but also for his etchings. On the right is Thames Warehouses, an example of one of his etchings in the collection. Whistler was also working in lithography from 1887 to 1896. He was a major champion of the print form and helped galvanize renewed enthusiasm for the medium. Nora's etching of the Chicago Bridge on the left is reminiscent of Charles Marion's etching depicting the arch of the Notre Dame Bridge. Marion was a prolific printmaker in the 19th century and lovingly documented different parts of a quickly changing Paris. Like the French printmaker, Hamilton depicted the underside of the bridge, which provided her with the opportunity to focus on the play of light and shadow. She also captured the movement from the ripples in the water. The artist left a thin layer of ink on the etched plate to give her printed image a warm brown atmospheric tone. America's big cities, like Marion's 19th century Paris, were transforming with the rise of the skyscrapers, industry, and resulting social changes. In October of 1899, while Nora was in Lucerne during her European trip, she suffered a breakdown and convalesced in hospitals in Zurich. Nora and her mother remained in Europe until the summer. In fall of 1900, she shared an apartment in Chicago with Alice, who introduced her sister to Hull House, where Nora continued to recover. Back in spring 1895, 5 years earlier, Nora had learned of a speaking engagement by Jane Addams at the Methodist Church in Fort Wayne. Nora, Alice, and their cousin Agnes all attended. Addams was already famous for founding Hull House, a settlement house serving Chicago's impoverished immigrant and working class in the surrounding neighborhoods through educational programs and social services. Alice and Agnes resolved to be involved with settlement houses. Alice found a home with Hull House for 22 years, and Agnes went to Lighthouse in Philadelphia. Nora became director of Children's Art Program in 1921. Alice's letters note that 2 years later in 1923, Nora was in charge of the Hull House Art School, which enlarged and reorganized the existing art classes for children. Around this time period, Nora switched from painting to etching and drawing. Adams spoke of a pile of lithography stones and a press in their art studio. Hull House offered classes in etching, linocut, and lithography through their reproduction club. Nora's artistic experiences in Europe, coupled with the availability of equipment at Hull House, probably contributed to her enthusiasm for etching and lithography over painting. Nora was an active member of the Chicago Society of Etchers that was founded in 1910 to encourage the appreciation of the medium. In January 1911, she participated in an exhibition of American etchings at the Art Institute of Chicago. Included were 2 etchings, The Path in the Woods and The Sweatshop Workers, revealing her range of subjects. Her artwork depicts 2 poles, from picturesque views, such as the Chicago Bridge, to images of contemporary urban life. In 1912, Nora provided illustration for Jane Addams's book, 20 Years at Hull House. Included is this etching of sweatshop workers, perhaps the same work in the checklist for the Art Institute of Chicago exhibition. On the left is one of Nora's record cards documenting her enrollment at the Art Students League in New York. The Art Students League was a coeducational institution founded by former students at the National Academy of Design in 1875. According to their records, Nora studied there periodically in 1892 to 95, 1912 to 13, and 1932 to 33. One of the first etching classes was established at the Art Students League in 1907. This record card shows that Nora attended etching classes in the summer of 1913 and was granted a scholarship. Many of Nora's letters can be viewed on microfilm at the Allen County Public Library. In 1893, Nora described to her cousin Jessie, "The men students are the most tiresome things. They try so desperately hard to be bohemian and artistic, and in the life class always shout and sing and blow crazy musical instruments." Nora shared another humorous anecdote about school with her cousin in a letter. She wrote, "Mr. Kenyon Cox is thought to be the best critic in drawing. He is terribly severe, though. One of the girls told him the other day that if Michelangelo were working in the league, then he would send him down to the preparatory." Nora did not date any of the works in the collection. However, these prints are in keeping with the approach to etching found in the first decades of the 20th century, especially by members of the print club. Like her contemporaries, Nora demonstrates an interest in different times of day and atmospheric conditions by depicting nighttime and a winter snowfall. And winter was a good time for artists to work inside on prints. Our prints in the collection show how Nora enjoyed returning to certain subjects and motifs, like bridges in this case. In her lithographs and drawings in the collection, Nora made a departure from the etchings in style and subject matter. Her highly detailed depictions of tree-lined scenes are in stark contrast to the loose handling we see in her impressions of families and individuals in the city, on the city streets. She used an economy of line to make descriptive sketches, recalling George Bellows's use of charcoal on the left. During Nora's time at the Art Students League, she took classes with well-known painters, including William Merritt Chase, Kenyon Cox, Frank Dumont, and purportedly Robert Henry. Henry and the artists associated with the Ashcan School and the Eight were drawn to the teeming energy of city living. Their unorthodox works focused on unidealized views of the tenements and slums and daily life. We skipped one. There we go. So we see Robert Henry's work on the right. Her years in attendance at the Art Students League do not seem to correspond with Henry's years teaching there. However, he was actively teaching at other schools in New York, and his disciples were teaching at the Art Students League. Bryant Park, New York, is one of the few works that cites a specific location. The park is located near the New York Public Library and wouldn't have been a far walk to the Art Students League. Some renovations around 1900 would have included benches along retaining walls, perhaps like this one. Nora also provided illustrations to her sister's book, Exploring the Dangerous Trades, an autobiography of Alice Hamilton, MD, published in 1943. Working with Hull House's neighboring immigrant community surely had an impact on the sisters, especially with Nora's artistic sensibility. Alice commented, "I cannot remember when I began to see the working world through the worker's eyes." In April of 1940, Nora accompanied Alice to the Joplin, Missouri region. Alice had been invited to reassess the past problems of silicosis, a lung disease caused by the inhalation of dust containing silica, a potential occupational hazard with zinc and lead mining. Alice's work led to implementing safety standards and protection of laborers. Concentrating mill and heaps of tailings in tri-state region on the right was included in Alice's book. Nora rendered a largely bleak, featureless landscape. There is no modeling to give some color to the view. Her countryside has the feeling of a wasteland, a far cry from the lush, tree-lined landscapes in her earlier etchings. Alice recalled, "Nora went with me to sketch the tragic, mutilated country. I found the same abomination of desolation in the countryside as I had seen 27 years before." Tailings are the waste product from mining. Runoff can lead to surface and groundwater contamination. Using a similar approach in another illustration used in the book, Nora relied on quick descriptive strokes to depict workers gathered for a union meeting. She filled the entire composition with serious faces, adding to the intensity of the scene. We return to the Hamilton family tree to talk about the cousins of Nora. Born in Fort Wayne in 1866, Jessie Hamilton was the second oldest child of Andrew Holman and Phoebe Hamilton. Andrew Holman was the oldest, and his part of the family tree is at the top. On the right is a group photo of the cousins. Nora is pictured to the left. I believe Jessie is standing dressed in a solid dark dress next to her younger brother Tabor, who is at the center of the photo. Also of interest is Jessie's younger sister Agnes, who stands next to the two young boys on the right. Jessie was closest with cousin Edith. The female cousins numbered 12. Contrary to what was customary at the time, this generation of cousins all remained unmarried save one, the youngest, Hildegard Wagehals. Hildegard believed that in getting married, she was actually rebelling against a family tradition. Alice wrote, "The taboo is over at last." Jessie aspired to be an artist and studied in Fort Wayne in 1888 to 1893. She took classes with William Forsythe, a watercolorist pictured on the right, and J. Otis Adams, who commuted from Muncie to teach. Jessie taught at the Fort Wayne Art School from 1893 to 1898. While Montgomery and Gertrude Hamilton encouraged their daughters to leave home, Jessie and Agnes's father was not supportive of their educational pursuits and travel. After his death in 1895, their mother Phoebe permitted her children greater freedom. In this letter on the left, we see that illustrator Howard Pyle turned down Jessie's request to study with them. Instead, from 1898 to 1900, Jessie and sister Agnes attended the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in Philadelphia. Previously, there had been limited options for women to study art in the 18th and 19th century. The Pennsylvania Academy of Fine Arts had allowed women to exhibit since it opened in 1805. However, it was only in 1844 that the board of directors resolved to permit women to draw from plaster casts. These were replicas of Greek, Roman, and Renaissance sculpture. It was in a class of women only, known as Ladies' Day, exclusively on Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays for 1 hour from 10 to 11. In 1856, women could draw alongside men from plaster class, albeit donning fig leaves on male nudes. It took another 20 years until women could paint the nude male cast without the fig leaf. Jessie's letters are also accessible at the Allen County Public Library and give some insight into studying at the Academy. On October 10th, 1898, she wrote, "This is my week. Every morning I draw in the life classroom. Then we come home to lunch and go back as quickly as possible on Tuesday, Wednesdays, and Saturdays when a model sits for the head. I assume this may be for portraiture. On Monday and Saturday afternoons comes the irregular cast modeling, but as Saturday afternoon is taken for me, I get it in if I can on another afternoon. That is the program for 2 weeks in succession. Then for the next 2 weeks, the painting of the head is Tuesday, Wednesday, and Saturday morning. When the live cast class is given up, there is an afternoon women's class from 4 to 7, and we mean to go sometimes from 4 to 6, but so far we have not been able. To help you visualize this further, here's John Sloan's etching that depicts painter Thomas Anschutz, the influential instructor from the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts, lecturing on anatomy to Robert Henry's students at the New York School of Art in 1905. While at the Academy, Jessie studied with William Merritt Chase and Cecilia Beaux. Beaux studied in Philadelphia and then in Paris, where she was influenced by Impressionism. Beaux taught drawing and portraiture as a full professor from 1895 to 1915 at the Academy, the first woman to do so. Quoted in an interview for the Philadelphia Public Ledger, William Merritt Chase described Beaux as not only the greatest living woman painter, but the best that has ever lived. Jessie's letters from this time express her uncertainty about her level of skill and apprehension about going through critiques. In a letter of October 25th, 1898, Jessie wrote, "The one thing I am learning over and over is I don't know anything, not the filmiest thing, thought of a thing. I haven't even the spark of possibility in me. I thought I had, and yet instead of being discouraged by the discovery, I feel more impelled to do something than I ever did in my life." Overall, Jessie seemed to savor her time there, repeatedly describing her experiences at the Academy as delightful. Jessie was represented in the 6th annual exhibition of Western artists in 1902 with 2 portraits. Her sister Agnes had 2 watercolors in the show as well. Harbor Scene is one of 2 etchings by Jessie in the collection. It demonstrates a nice use of aerial perspective as the view of the town in the distance is faint in comparison with the foreground. Jessie's work was also included in the 72nd annual exhibition at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts in 1903. There was a prestigious jury including Thomas Eakins, Child Haslam, and Robert Henry. Jessie remained in Fort Wayne to care for their mother. She continued to work in oil and etching. Jessie purchased a summer residence in Hadlam along with Agnes in 1920 and moved there in 1932. The next Hamilton artist we will look at is Jessie's younger sister, Agnes. In the group photograph of the Hamilton cousins, Agnes is on the right-hand side to the left of the 2 young boys, her cousins, Alan Hamilton and Creighton Williams. Agnes was closest to her cousins Alan and Alice, and they became known as the 3 A's. Agnes was a source of encouragement to Alice to pursue medicine when the family was not. The 2 also shared their passion for social service. Like her sister Jessie, Agnes studied at the Fort Wayne Art School from 1888 to 1893. She also taught at the Fort Wayne Art School from 1893 to 1898. Together, they studied in Philadelphia. It is interesting to look at Agnes's correspondence with her mother while she and Jessie were living in Philadelphia. We learned that Jessie had applied to Drexel, which is the note we saw earlier from Mr. Pyle. In a letter to their mother on September 24th, 1898, Agnes wrote, "This morning at breakfast, we received cards from the Academy, which said we were both in the highest course and can have the work we want. My opinion of the school has fallen considerably." We can assume the Academy is the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. In Agnes's letter, she spoke of the scheduled critiques of Cecilia Beaux and William Merritt Chase. The personalities of the 2 young women emerge in their writings. While Jessie's letters seem to express her delight with their studies, Agnes seemed to enjoy some aspects, but dramatically lamented about other classes. On October 13th, 1898, she wrote to her mother, "Other afternoons, Jessie models. I tried it once, but I hate it, so I don't think I shall do it any more for a while. It is all nonsense. I think on those extra days, I shall go to class in the figure, which meets from 4 to 6 every day. That way I shall get in at least 5 hours of work a day. Like Jessie, Agnes's talent in art was recognized in exhibitions. She and cousin Nora's works were juried into this exhibition in 1911. Nora again submitted an etching of sweatshop workers. Despite Agnes's success in exhibiting, her interest in social work won out. In 1902, she took up residence at the Lighthouse in Philadelphia, a settlement house where she remained for 30 years rather than the Hull House, much to her cousin Alice's disappointment. Here are some small-scale nature studies by Agnes. Like Nora and Jessie's work, nothing is dated. My guess is that these were done long after she left Philadelphia. I like the dramatic cropping of the tree in the left drawing. I find it reminiscent of a frequent compositional design in the woodblock prints of Utagawa Hiroshige. Hiroshige often severely cropped natural elements and figures in the foreground, lending an interesting decorative quality. Even though Agnes turned to settlement work in 1902, this 1916 exhibition catalog is evidence that art remained important to Agnes years later. The final Hamilton member we are going to look at today is from a different part of the family and is not listed on our family tree we've been consulting. James Montgomery Hamilton was born to Alan and Cecilia Hamilton. He was the great nephew of Nora's grandfather. After graduation from high school in 1894, James studied architecture at MIT and trained at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris. In 1901, he moved to Cleveland and joined the architectural firm Mead and Garfield. Later in 1911, James made partner. Mead and Hamilton designed private residences around Cleveland, especially the Shaker Heights area. They were the architects for the Cleveland Club, Mayfield Country Club, Hermit Club, and Kirtland Country Club. In Fort Wayne, he designed the Robert M. Foistel House, located at 4101 Taylor. Depicted here is the Tudor Arms Hotel in Cleveland, which has been restored today and is a DoubleTree hotel. James designed the O'Rourke home, and I'm hoping this is the one and the same pictured on the right. We have a number of drawings in graphite and in watercolor by James. The first drawing is of 12th century Abbey Church of St. Gilles in Provence, France. His work calls to mind the printmaker John Taylor Arms on the right, another artist in our collection who documented the great cathedrals of France and Italy. Arms had a background in architecture as well. The facade, built from 1120 to 1160, has a decorated entrance portico with 3 portals, the central one larger, with Corinthian columns and medieval sculptural decorations. We can see that James's interest in architecture and sculptural decorations. I haven't determined the location of Santa Maria on the left. In contrast to the painstaking detail of St. Gilles' facade, James simplified his subject into geometric shapes and angled lines. The remaining works by James in the collection are all watercolors. In the street scene on the right, the artist captured the effect of the intense sunlight as half of the passageway is drenched in light and the other half remains in shadow. For the light, he uses the white of the paper and leaves it unpainted. During the mid to late 19th century, artists and the public began to appreciate watercolor beyond its use for only preparatory studies. Artists such as John Singer Sargent showed a great predilection for the medium. In the case of James Hamilton, watercolor's portability lent itself well for sketching outdoors while traveling. If we compare this drawing with a contemporary photograph of Doge's palace, we can take note of the details the artist opted to include and those he chose to simplify and omit. Again, James captures the brilliant light hitting the delicate Venetian Gothic elements of Doge Palace. The transparent layers of watercolor set on a light colored paper gives the work a brilliance and vibrancy. Here we have a comparison between a historical photograph of the Arch of Titus and James's watercolor. In James's interpretation, he uses the light to flood the monument and reduce it into simple planes. Its solidness contrasts with the fluid washes in the sky. However, here at the Fort Wayne Museum of Art, even more than James Hamilton, the artist, architect, we fondly remember him as one of our greatest benefactors. Upon his death, he bequeathed works from his personal collection, including a number of paintings by European artists. Perhaps these were souvenirs and mementos of his travels. Also included were works by Nora, Jesse, and himself. James is buried in Fort Wayne at Lindenwood Cemetery. Thank you for tuning in. Please join us on Wednesday, January 19th, when we will look at the works of Elizabeth Catlett, Charles White, and Francisco Mora.